guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you're new here, I'm Matilda, and if you're not, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the business of today. Today I'm just going to be sharing with you guys, or rather I'm going to be telling you guys, as much as my knowledge goes, why you should trim your hair. We're going to be talking about the importance of trimming your hair, the reasons why you should trim your hair. I know I'm saying the same thing, but I'm just saying all of these things so that you can understand what exactly we're going to be talking about. Now, I should mention that if you have hair, this video pertains to you, okay? If you have hair growing from your head, it pertains to you. Now, whether you have straight hair, wavy hair, curly hair, coily hair, whatever kind of hair texture you have, this video applies to you, okay? Now, I should mention also that you may relate to some other reasons more if you have curly hair or coily hair. So if you're from the number 3 texture, 3A to C, 4A to C, then you definitely relate with some of the reasons why you should trim your hair more, because you're experiencing some of those things. But regardless of it, if you have any kind of hair and you're trying to keep your hair healthy, or you're trying to grow your hair, then this video pertains to you, okay? So just keep watching, and I hope you're able to learn one thing or another. We're going to be covering different bases. We're going to be covering if you should trim your hair dry or wet, if you should trim your hair every 3 days or every 6 months or every 4 years. We're going to be covering the time frames you should be trimming your hair as well. We're going to be covering if you should trim your hair by yourself or you should go to a professional. Basically, I'm just going to touch base on various questions that I know that I've asked myself whenever I think of trimming my hair or not. So I'm just going to cover all those bases, just talk about it randomly. It's not going to be in any particular order, but I am going to be talking about the reasons in an order. So just keep watching. I hope you learned something. Let's get to it. Okay, so there are two things that I feel like are responsible for a lot of the problems we get in our hair. Now, it's not as if those two things are the only problems, but when you look at the different problems that we have in our hair, it's most times, more often than not, linked back to those two things. Now, of course, there are many other things, but those two things I feel like are one of the major problems. So the first one is split ends. Now, if you don't know what split ends are, just go on Google, you see it, but they're pretty much when your hair has like a temper breakage, and the hair strand breaks in a way that's not like healthy for the hair. So the ends of the strand of the hair is like split into like 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. Now the split may not just be like down in the middle of the hair. It may be like one is down here and then the other one is up here. But basically the hair is not just one strand anymore. It splits at the end. Now, if you have that, you're gonna have a lot of frizz, like a lot of frizz in your hair, because like when the strands split like that, the hair is not gonna come down like it usually goes. It's not gonna follow the regular curl pattern or the regular straight pattern. If your hair is straight, it's probably gonna go like this, and then that's where you're gonna see the frizz that's all over the place, and that doesn't look pretty. So split ends are most likely, more often than not, responsible for frizz most of the time. Now, like I said, if you don't know what split ends are, you can just go on Google. There are so many articles that are explaining what exactly split ends are, because I feel like I cannot exactly convey what they are. Now, the second thing are single or double strand knots. Now, if you have curly hair, this is for you. You know what they are. Single strand knots are when just one strand of hair just gets tied, like it has a little knot in it. That's when you have a single strand knot. Now, when you have a single strand knot, the next thing it just makes way for a bunch of other things. Your hair starts to break, then you develop split ends. So it's just like a downward hill, pretty much. So you want to make sure that you don't have single strand knots or double strand knots. Now, double strand knots is when one strand of hair gets tied to another strand of hair. that's when you have a double strand knot, or when one strand of hair is tied in one strand of hair has 2 knots in it. Yeah, like I said, those things they cause frizz because it doesn't make the hair follow the pattern that it's supposed to go, whether it's straight or curly. Either way, it creates a change in pattern. So when that change occurs, then your hair starts to get frizzy. There's breakage. Another thing that causes frizz is a breakage because all the strands are not the same length, which is normal. All your strands are never really going to be the same length, but at least for the most part, most of them should be around the same area. So by the time some strands are like this long, some are this long, one is 8 inches, another one is 12 inches. When you have all those strands all over the place and it's already unhealthy, you're most likely going to have split ends. You're most likely going to have frizz. Okay, so the second reason why you want to trim your hair is to gain length. Now, a lot of people always say, oh, trim your hair, it will make your hair grow longer. And I know that sounds very opposite. Like, how does trimming your hair make it get longer? Like, how does that make sense? Like, how do you cut something and then it grows longer? Makes no sense. But the way it works is in that it's kind of connected to the third reason, which is to promote healthy hair. If your hair is healthy, it's going to retain length. So when I say to gain length retention, it's like you're keeping all the length that you're gaining. Now there's some people who go, oh, my hair doesn't grow, my hair isn't growing. No, that's not it. Everybody's hair grows. Your hair is just not retaining length. Now, for your hair to retain length, there has to be a lot of things. Your hair needs to be healthy to retain length. So if your hair isn't healthy, it can't retain length. So that's why reason number 2 and reason number 3 are kind of intertwined. Now, if you have split ends, your hair is obviously unhealthy. If you have single or double strand knots, your hair is obviously unhealthy. You can get either one of these things by manipulation of your hair, too much heat, it's gonna just damage your hair. It's gonna make it unhealthy. And once your hair is unhealthy, it just makes way for the knots and the split ends. So you want to make sure that you're not manipulating too much. You're using minimal heat. If you have to use heat at all, make sure it's minimal. Try to use heat protecting spray on your hair before using the heat, because those 2 things, manipulation and heat, are the 2 major things that causes damage to your hair. And if you keep yanking on it or blow drying, flat ironing all the time, the ends especially, because the ends are the ones that suffer the attack the most. Okay, when you're combing it, most of the time it's the ends that is suffering it. Now when you have the single strand knots, by the time you're manipulating the hair, you're brushing it, you're combing it, it's breaking in the process of detangling, because you're trying to detangle it. Now this is one of the parts when I say that if you have curly hair, you'll be able to relate to it more, because curly hair is more prone to tangling together. So if you have curly hair and you do a lot of manipulation, you're most likely going to have split ends and single strand knots, double strand knots, maybe even triple strand knots. I know I get triple strand knots. I know I get 3 hairs that are all tied together in one little ball and I cannot untie it. It's not gonna, the hair has to come out eventually. That strand or those strands have to come out. So if you want to retain your length and keep your hair healthy, you should trim it regularly, because when you trim it, the thing is, when you have split ends, it doesn't just stay where it is. It travels all the way through the strand of hair. So it's making the hair unhealthy from the tip of it to the root. It's going to take it all the way to the root. So you need to kind of attack it before it attacks you. You need to make sure that you cut off wherever that split end starts from or whatever, before it gets to you, meaning gets like really, really bad, which is why you need to trim your hair regularly. Now I feel like trimming your hair, the time frame in which you should trim your hair is dependent on everybody's hair type, texture, I don't know, different factors. So there's no like one period of time where you should trim your hair. But if I had to put it in a bracket, I would say every 4 weeks to like 6 months. That's the best way I can describe it, because it depends on your kind of hair, it depends on the kind of all of that. But anyway, let's move to the next reason. We're going to go straight to number 4, which is to make detangling easier, which is still pretty much the same thing we've talked about, the single strand knots, the double strand knots. When you have those things in your hair, it's difficult for you to manipulate it, and when you manipulate it, you're making it worse. So it's kind of like an ongoing wheel. If you don't do this, you can't do this, and if you don't do that, you can't do this, and the cycle just, it's like a never-ending cycle. The cycle just keeps going and keeps going, and you're just stuck in a rut. So you need to keep that hair trimmed, keep your hair trimmed, so that you can detangle easy. The first reason is to reduce frizz. The next is to gain length. The next is to promote healthy hair, and the fourth reason is to make detangling easy. Like I said, all of them are intertwined. If you want, you could put split ends and single strand knots as number 5 and number 6, but it still kind of falls all under the same category. So another reason why you should always trim your hair is because when you have split ends, it makes your hair lose moisture fast, because it has like multiple exit ways for the moisture to just kind of leave. That's why most people that have split ends usually have dry hair. Most people that have frizz usually have dry hair. When you have all those things, your hair is not hanging onto moisture, so it's just drying itself out, and it's just making the situation worse. Now, if you have split ends or single strand knots, you're more prone to so many more problems with your hair. You're gonna probably have dry hair, you're gonna have dead strands on your head, you're gonna have frizz, you're gonna have your hair is gonna lose moisture fast, dry hair. Yeah, and if you have all those things, it's like you're just deterring yourself from healthier hair. So you need to make sure that you're trimming those ends, because when you trim the damaged parts, the part that keeps coming down is healthy. But when the hair is not healthy, as it's growing, it's breaking, it's growing, it's breaking. So it doesn't make any sense. Now the last reason is to make sure that your detangling goes smooth and easy, because if you have unhealthy hair that has knots and that has split ends, your hair is just going to be all over the place. It's going to be attaching to the other one. It's going to be dry, so detangling is going to be a nightmare. I mean, you should never detangle your hair dry anyway, but if you know what I mean. When I say it's going to be dry, I mean your hair is going to lack moisture, so detangling is still going to be annoying. But yeah, so when it comes to how often you should trim your hair, it's hard to say any one specific time frame, because everybody's hair type is different. Now I have really coarse 4C hair, and my hair is low porosity. It does not retain moisture. I find it very hard to keep moisture in my hair because of how tight my coils are. I find that I have single strand knots and double strand knots all the time in my hair, which leads to breakage, and then it's just a whole nightmare. So I try as much as possible, or at least I know I should. I think I'm gonna do it now. I just had my hair trimmed about 4 weeks ago, but I know that, especially because the last time I trimmed my hair, it took me about an 8-month range before I trimmed again, and it was just horrible. I had so much problems. Like, I had so many split ends in my hair, so many knots. There was literally just dead hair all over, because the hair was breaking, and because it was already not attached to like my scalp anymore, but it was still tied to another strand, it just stayed there. So trimming is gonna help you like get rid of issues like that. So if you have straight hair, you're probably gonna need to trim less than someone who has coily hair, but then it also depends on moisture, the humidity of wherever you are. There are different factors, so you need to actually speak to a healthcare professional about it. Now, if you want to trim your hair by yourself, it's a whole different thing. So you need to do a lot of research. Please, I beg you, do not just take scissors and trim your hair, because there are so many things that could go wrong. You could use dull scissors that would even make your hair worse, because as you're cutting it, you're just creating split ends on those strands already, and you're just so it's just pointless, because you're cutting it to make it healthy, but you're already making it unhealthy by doing that. So you need the right pair of scissors to do that, to cut your hair yourself, to trim your hair yourself. Another thing is, there's a whole thing about trimming your hair wet or dry. When I go to salons, I see a lot of, when you're giving haircuts, a lot of times the hair is wet, even if the person's hair is like not washed or the person wasn't trying to wash their hair, they spray their hair and then they, you know, put the little finger thing and then they're like, but I feel like that's fine if you have straight hair, but if you have curly hair, that's like tricky because curly hair tends to shrink when it's wet. Like if you have 4C hair, you know the struggle of shrinkage. If you don't have 4C hair, if you have like loose waves or like a little bit of water wave or whatever, I'm sure you still get some kind of shrinkage. So it's not exactly advisable to trim your hair when it's wet because you're not seeing the true length of it. So it's most advisable to trim your hair when it's very wet, so that when it's very dry, oh my gosh, when it's very dry, so that you can see the true length of it. Because if you trim your hair when it's wet, and if you have bangs, for instance, imagine you had bangs and your hair was wet, so you bring it down, you trim it, but when it's dry, your bangs are way over here because why? It was stretched. The hair was stretched, so that's not the true length of it at that point. So when it's dry, it's not in the same place. It's not in the same place that it was gonna be. I don't know if you get my point, but yeah. So if you have curly hair or wavy hair, people with wavy hair can still get away with it. But if you have coily or curly hair, please don't do it. Please don't. Now, if you can afford it, I would advise you to go to a professional who can see everything, can see all the parts of your hair. But if you can't afford it, or you're just not going to be bothered with going to a hairstylist and you want to do it yourself, make sure you do a lot of research. Make sure you have good hair cutting scissors. Make sure you have a lot of mirrors around you so that you can see everything you're doing, because if you make a mistake, you have no one to blame but yourself. Just do it right if you're going to do it. Now, another thing is some people what they do is when they want to trim their hair, they don't exactly wait for a particular period of time. They just kind of hunt. So they hunt for the damaged strands and they trim around, which is kind of a good idea, but the problem with that is at some point your hair is going to be uneven all over. You're going to have like different lengths everywhere. Now, if you're very strategic with it and you're very smart with it, you may not have that problem. But if you're not really, like, if you don't really plan it, like whenever you just see a strand, you just go psh, psh, it's not gonna be a good idea for you, because at the end of the day, your hair is just gonna be all over the place. You're not gonna have equal strands. Like, at least, even if your hair shouldn't be like equal all around, but you know, the hair in each section, like if it's the hair here, then it should be pretty much the same length. But if you have one strand that's short here and the strand right next to it is like really long, it's not going to make any sense. So if you were doing that, you might want to have like a designated length that, okay, whenever you're cutting this side or this side, you know, okay, you're only taking 2 inches off it or 3 inches off it, or you know how many inches you're going to leave in it. That's the best way I can advise you to do that. Another way is to do it in sections. You can section your hair into 4 or 6 parts and just trim it by section. The easiest way that I find that makes the most sense, the way that I find makes the most sense is to actually section it and then resection it. So like you take each section and then you make little sections. So you're going section by section, so you're getting the most kind of length together at the same time. Because if you're like me, for instance, my back hair is shorter than my front hair. So, and my middle hair is probably the shortest, which is weird actually. But the hair in the middle of my head is so kinky, so it's so like thick and straight in there, like just sitting in there. So if you're like me that has different lengths of hair, you probably want to do that. You probably want to do that because you don't have the same length all over. So if you decide to just like go into 4 sections and then you go in the first section and you just trim that whole section, you're just going to be in trouble. At the end of the day, your hair is just going to look like... So I recorded this video in a very scattered way because all these thoughts are just in my head, and I've been wanting to do this video for a long time and I've just not had the time. So I recorded this video in a very scattered way. I'm going to try to piece it together in the edit, but if it's not, guys, just stick to the message. Stick and listen to the message that I have to offer you, and then then judge the other things later on, okay? Anyway, thank you so much. If you learned something, let me know in the comment section. If you were able to pick up one thing or another, let me know in the comment section. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you feel like I said something that's not entirely true, also let me know in the comment section below. I'd like to find out what your opinion is. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Stay beautiful.